evening. I'm Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Monday, May 26th. Today marks the return to the House for newly elected and returning MPs after a 5-month hiatus to choose a new Liberal leader and hold a general election. And earlier today, Liberal MP Francis Scarpellejo was elected as Speaker of the House of Commons.
My duty to inform the House that it is the member for Lac Saint-Louis.
According to House of Commons procedure, electing a Speaker of the House is the first step of a new parliamentary session, second only to the swearing in of MPs. And King Charles III and Queen Camilla have arrived in Canada today for the first time since the King's coronation more than 2 years ago. The King is set to open Parliament and deliver a throne speech tomorrow, something Queen Elizabeth II did twice, but the event will mark the first time Canada's head of state has opened Parliament since 1977. Having the speech delivered by Canada's head of state is meant to send a clear signal beyond Canada's borders at a time of U.S. President Donald Trump's threats to make Canada the 51st state. Prime Minister Mark Carney told his caucus to brace for a busy few weeks and months as Parliament reopens, promising to implement his vision for the country.
We have what the world wants. We have the values the world respects. So, we are going to be very, very busy in the next few weeks. But we are going to be very, very busy in the next few months. We are going to be very, very busy in the next few years. We're going to have to do things previously thought impossible at speeds not seen in generations. And your commitment, your commitment, your ideas, your energy will be essential, and our partnership will be vital. It's my solemn commitment to work with all of you to seize this moment for Canadians, to build big, to build bold, to build together, to build now. Let's get to work.
Mr. Carney has already made clear his top priorities, including the negotiation of a new economic and security relationship with the United States and strengthening ties with reliable trading allies while building up what he calls one Canadian economy. And at the Liberal caucus meeting in Ottawa, the party voted against adopting a formal process to eject their leader should the need arise.
The Reform Act.
What do you think about the Reform Act?
I'm going to vote against. I think it's an imperfect conservative bill to deal with Stephen Harper, and it was an imperfect act to deal with Stephen Harper's time in office. Canadians want to see us moving forward. They want to see us working, and this is a lot of questions and a lot of focus on this former conservative piece of legislation, and so my constituents want to see us getting to work, so let's move on. I support the leader, and I think we all do in this room, and we didn't expect to be here 6 months ago. It doesn't mean that things are going to go wrong. I think caucus was particularly effective under the previous Prime Minister, and eventually was brought to the right decision. I think this is, again, time to move forward, and Canadians expect us to do that.
The internal debate was prompted by Liberal MPs upset that former leader Justin Trudeau was able to stay at the helm despite numerous calls from caucus for him to step aside. At the meeting, Mark Carney delivered a speech intended to rally his Liberal caucus, laying out his government's agenda for the reopening of Parliament. And Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says his caucus will be pushing measures to make Canada more affordable, safe, self-reliant, and united, as Conservative MPs prepare to return to Parliament without him.
And priorities take plans. Our plan, first, we've got to get the cost of living down. And we're going to be demanding a spring budget that reveals the true deficit, lowers spending, taxes, and inflation. Second, to get homes built by cutting taxes and red tape on construction. Third, to restore economic independence by unleashing our businesses and our resources. Fourth, to bring safety to our streets by locking up dangerous offenders and securing our borders. And fifth, speaking of our borders, we need to get immigration under control after a decade of Liberal incompetence.
But the Conservative leader added a new item to his team's checklist, demanding a spring budget.
Well, Mr. Carney told us all that, he said, I'd like to say it again and again, that a slogan is not a plan. Well, I point out that is a slogan, but but I'll tell you what a plan is. A budget is a plan, is literally a plan. And at first, his finance minister said there would be no budget this year for the first time outside of COVID in approximately 2 decades. Then the Prime Minister came out and said, well, there will be a budget, but it will be in the fall when half of the fiscal year is over. How do you budget for something that has already happened? Maybe they think that budgets will balance themselves. We need a budget to cut bureaucracy, consultants, foreign aid, and corporate welfare to generate the savings for lower debt, taxes, and inflation. For too long, workers and small businesses have carried this morbidly obese government on their backs. They can't afford it. They can't bear it anymore. Lowering the cost of government will lower the cost of living.
Former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's recent departure from politics will net him over $8 million across 2 pensions, plus a large severance check, according to calculations made public by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, who released a chart of estimated pensions and severance payouts to departing MPs. Their national director, Franco Terrazzano, joined us for more on the payout.
Yeah, so the pensions are calculated in that, first of all, an MP has to serve for at least 6 years to be eligible for a pension. And the amounts of pensions depend on how long they served as a member of parliament, what their roles were and what their pay were when they were in office, and then also the pension rules at the time when they were a member of parliament. And look, like you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars for each former member of parliament annually through their pension. In fact, it can go up to about $171,000 a year. There was one former member of parliament who's going to be getting a starting annual pension of $171,000 a year. And in fact, there are 13 former members of parliament who are walking away with a annual pension of more than $100,000. And like, look, this adds up fast for taxpayers, right? You're looking at a total bill of $5 million in annual pensions, totaling $187 million for those former MPs over their lifetime. Yeah, so Trudeau's is leaving office with 2 taxpayer-funded pensions. He gets his, regular member of parliament pension, and then he also gets a prime minister's pension on top of it. So the MP pension will start at about $141,000 a year for Trudeau, totaling $6.5 million to the age of 90. And then he gets a prime minister's pension on top of it, which will start at about $73,000 a year and total $1.9 million over his lifetime. So you add up the MP pension with the prime minister's pension, and Trudeau's 2 taxpayer-funded pensions will total about $8.4 million over his lifetime. And like, look, it is long past time for the government to end the second pension for future prime ministers. I mean, a prime minister is already getting millions of dollars through their first pension. They shouldn't be billing taxpayers more for a second pension.
Critics would argue that generous pensions are an important aspect of having high-quality members of parliament and to discourage the incentive for corruption while in office. We asked Mr. Terrazzano to respond to that criticism.
I would answer that with a question here. Look, these members of parliament at base are already making more than $200,000 a year in annual salary while they serve, right? A backbench member of parliament's getting a salary of about $210,000. A minister's getting a salary of about $310,000. The prime minister's salary is just shy of $420,000 a year, and they're giving themselves pay raises every single year. So, here's the obvious question. Why can't these politicians who are making a salary north of $200,000 a year save for their own retirement rather than relying on a platinum taxpayer funded pension. Okay, it's called the House of Commons for a reason. They're supposed to be there representing ordinary Canadians. But what we've seen as they've given themselves pay raises and platinum perks is that they have become financially divorced from the people that they're supposed to be representing.
Coming up after the break, Israel raises its advisory for those traveling to Canada. A U.S. German citizen is arrested for allegedly attempting to burn down the U.S. embassy in Tel Aviv. Donald Trump gives the EU an extension on tariffs until July 9th, and tens of thousands of people took the streets of Toronto on Sunday for the annual walk with Israel. We'll have these stories and more of today's top headlines right after the break. Israel's National Security Council has raised its travel advisory for Canada from level 1 no warning to level 2 potential threat, citing an increased danger to Israelis and Jews living or traveling in the country. The NSC noted a growing threat from terrorist elements in Canada, pointing to a series of recent attacks and threats targeting Jewish institutions and individuals. Over the past 18 months, there have been multiple incidents, including shootings, arson attacks, and direct threats against Jews and Israelis. B'nai B'rith Canada documented a historic high of anti-Semitic incidents in 2024, with 6,219 reported cases, including firebombing of synagogues, attacks on schools and Jewish-owned businesses, and several arrests of suspects on terrorism-related charges. The tally represented a 7.4% increase from 2023 and a 124% increase from 2022. According to the Justice Department, a dual U.S. and German citizen was arrested on Sunday for allegedly attempting to burn down the U.S. embassy in Tel Aviv, Israel. Officials said they arrested Joseph Neumeyer, age 28, at John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. He was deported by Israeli authorities after he was found with explosives in his backpack near the embassy. Officials say he had posted on his social media account pledging to burn down the embassy in Tel Aviv and had called for, quote, death to America, death to Americans. Tens of thousands of people took the streets of Toronto on Sunday for the annual Walk with Israel, breaking the event's attendance record for the second straight year. Local law enforcement estimated there were roughly 56,000 participants, surpassing the previous benchmark set last year by 6,000. I don't The Solidarity Walk took place days after two Israeli embassy employees were shot and killed outside a Jewish museum in Washington, D.C. Investigators and leaders around the world have denounced the killings as a targeted anti-Semitic hate crime. President Donald Trump said Sunday that he has agreed to give the European Union an extension until July 9th on tariffs after a very nice phone call from European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen.
She just called me, as you know, and she asked for an extension on the June 1st date. And she said she wants to get down to serious negotiation because I told you specifically, haven't I told anybody that would listen? They have to do that. And we had a very nice call, and I agreed to move it. I believe July 9th would be the date. But that was the date she requested. Could we move it from June 1st to July 9th? And I agreed to do that. And that she said we will rapidly get together and see if we can work something out.
As recently as Friday, Mr. Trump said that he was not looking for a deal with the EU and that their tariff rate was set at 50% and would go into effect on June 1st. That rate would have come after he had imposed a 20% reciprocal tariff on the EU in April, which itself was also delayed. President Trump also said that Russian President Vladimir Putin has gone absolutely crazy by stepping up the bombing of Ukraine while the U.S. tries to broker peace. His post on social media overnight came after a Ukrainian official said Russia launched the biggest drone attack on Ukraine in the more than 3-year war. The Russian bombardment Sunday night included 355 drones and 9 cruise missiles. It was the third mass attack in as many nights. Yesterday, when speaking to reporters, the president spoke about the strikes.
As well, Yeah, I'll give you an update. I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all, okay? We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all.
President, what do you want to do about
Not
that?
surprised. I'm very surprised. We'll see what we're going to do. What am I going to tell you? You're the fake news, aren't you? You're totally fake. All right, any other questions? I don't like what Putin is doing, not even a little bit. He's killing people. And something happened to this guy, and I don't like it.
Our correspondent Adam Zivo, who was on the ground in Ukraine, has more on the attacks.
On Friday and Saturday night, Russia bombarded over 30 Ukrainian cities with hundreds of missiles and drones. The Saturday night attack specifically was the largest aerial strike against Ukraine since the beginning of the war, with Russia launching 298 drones and 69 missiles of various types. These weapons targeted Ukraine's major population centers, including the capital Kyiv, leading to the deaths of at least 12 people, with dozens more injured. Residential areas of no discernible military value were bombarded, suggesting that the attacks were indiscriminate in nature and intended to terrorize civilians. In response, U.S. President Donald Trump condemned the attacks on Truth Social, where he wrote that Russian President Vladimir Putin has gone absolutely crazy with his needless killing of Ukrainian civilians. Trump then stated that it is his belief that Putin wants to conquer all of Ukraine, not just a piece of the country, and he warned that any attempt to do so would result in Russia's downfall. These massive aerial attacks have evidently created a political headache for Trump, who has spent the past month portraying Putin as a trustworthy partner for peace. In early May, Ukraine and its main European allies announced that they would impose crushing sanctions against Russia if Putin did not agree to an unconditional 30-day ceasefire, which was supposed to be a precursor for an eventual peace deal. However, Putin ignored this threat and he counterproposed direct peace talks in Istanbul instead, without any ceasefire preconditions. From the outset, security experts believed that Putin proposed these talks as a delaying tactic and that Russia had no real intention of negotiating in good faith in this particular venue. But after Trump publicly supported Putin's proposal, Ukraine and its allies were forced to play along, which meant postponing sanctions. As predicted, the Istanbul talks collapsed after Russia unreasonably demanded that Kyiv hand over large swaths of unconquered territory. Afterwards, European and American lawmakers were ready to finally impose tighter sanctions, but then Trump had a 2-hour cordial phone call with Putin last week, after which he announced that peace negotiations would resume immediately, which, of course, meant that sanctions would be further delayed. In summary, Trump repeatedly helped Putin avoid sanctions by playing along with the pretense that Russia is genuinely interested in peace, and Putin repaid him by launching an unprecedentedly large aerial strike against Ukraine civilians, which made Trump look like a naive fool. Trump's latest Truth Social post suggests that he may be realizing, however belatedly, that Putin is not actually his friend and that the Kremlin's promises should not be taken at face value. Trump has reportedly grown increasingly frustrated with Putin over the past few months because Russia's unwillingness to compromise for peace has made Trump look weak, so this appears to be an extension of that trend. As for the citizens of Ukraine, they continue to persevere as best they can. Many have grown used to these attacks and have learned to cope with them. I actually happened to be in Kyiv last weekend during these attacks. The first night, I could hear the thunderous booms of drones and missiles being intercepted in the sky, as well as the gunfire of anti-air defenses. I hardly slept, as the explosions went on for hours. The next day, life continued as usual, though. People saw their friends, ate and drank on patios, listened to music, and laughed. But most people looked tired. Some looked exhausted, because the explosions had, of course, kept everyone awake the previous night. The same was true on Sunday after a second night of bombing robbed the city of its rest. Yes, a certain degree of normalcy persists in Kyiv along with many other Ukrainian cities, because Ukrainians in general are quite resilient and Western-supplied anti-air defense systems do their jobs well. But there is always a risk that the situation will change, and that terror will germinate here, because far from de-escalating the situation, Russia is ramping up its drone production and is expected to launch ever larger attacks in an attempt to overrun Ukraine's defenses.
A deal has still not been reached between Canada Post and the union representing 55,000 postal workers. The two sides met yesterday, and talks are expected to resume over the next few days, as the union imposes a national ban on overtime as its preferred strike action for now. The last offer Canada Post presented to the union last week included wage increases and plans to roll out a fleet of part-time workers to facilitate weekend parcel delivery. CUPW said that the union learned yesterday afternoon that Canada Post had left the premises to review documents from the union. And now an update on the World Junior Hockey trial. Justice Maria Caracia ruled the text messages sent from Brett Howden to his teammate Taylor Radish on June 19, 2018, are not admissible in the trial. The texts center on the inappropriate touching Howden says he saw Dylan Dubé do to EM in the London hotel room. Judge Caracia says the texts are hearsay evidence and their truth and reliability cannot be guaranteed. She told the court today that she sent her decision to the lawyers last night, and she proceeded to read the legal reasons for why she won't allow the texts to be considered as evidence. When we return from the commercial break, we'll have our weekly Caldwell segment where Brendan Caldwell and I will be discussing the future of the energy sector under Mark Carney's government. After that, we'll have more of today's top national and international headlines. Forum Daily News will be right back after this. One of the major issues in the federal election was energy, specifically how Canada can unlock its energy potential, especially while the trade war looms with the United States. Last week, while speaking in Calgary, newly minted Energy Minister Tim Hodgson spoke on the importance of cutting red tape and approval times in the energy sector.
We will build a new foundation, one that delivers the strongest, most resilient economy in the G7. We are living through what the Prime Minister calls a hinge moment in our national story. This is not a time for half measures or slow steps. It's a time for bold action, clear decisions, and a renewed spirit for building. That means reframing the national conversation. No more asking, why build? The real question is, how do we get it done? That means breaking apart barriers and cutting through red tape. It also means doing things responsibly the first time, meeting our duty to consult so Indigenous peoples are true partners, and protecting our environment so we don't have to clean up mistakes later. I want to be very clear. In the new economy we are building, Canada will no longer be defined by delay. We will be defined by delivery. I'm going to say that again. In the new economy we are building, Canada will no longer be defined by delay. We will be defined by delivery.
And the urgency to build now was echoed by the Prime Minister just yesterday when he spoke to Liberal MPs in Ottawa.
Your commitment, your ideas, your energy will be essential, and our partnership will be vital. It's my solemn commitment to work with all of you to seize this moment for Canadians, to build big, to build bold, to build together, to build now. Let's get to work. Merci beaucoup.
Joining us now to discuss what's next for the energy sector under Prime Minister Mark Carney is Brendan Caldwell, Director at Caldwell Securities Limited. Brendan, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. It should be a fascinating one to build bigger, bolder, better, but they don't at any point say to build what. But we'll talk about it.
Now, how will Prime Minister Mark Carney's new energy policies impact the financing of major oil pipeline, especially in light of ongoing regulatory and geopolitical challenges?
Wow. I think I can fairly say, along with the rest of the investment industry as we sit here right now, Teresa, we have no idea. Now, I am cautiously optimistic being the sort of economist euphemism that something will get done. When they say build bolder, bigger, better, and all the different B words, the implication is they're talking about Alberta energy and getting that to blue water, getting that to tidewater, getting it to markets that can use it around the world. And whether it's gas or oil, to getting pipelines built so that north, west, or east, and potentially south, that the energy actually gets out to the world. Because there is a to not to contradict our former prime minister, but I think there is a business case for Canadian energy elsewhere. So in terms of the how did you phrase it? The environmental regulations, the strictest ones are here in Canada, where there have been limits on how much carbon, which is really the sole source of energy that's being targeted, as though there aren't problems with other forms of energy. There have been caps put on how much energy can be produced, limits, and I think that's what's galling the people of Alberta most. So I don't know what those policies are actually going to look like in real life. We'll have to see when the first one gets approved, and or maybe when the first one gets built. Better, bigger, badder.
And how could stricter emissions rules change profits and investments for Canadian oil and gas companies?
Well, I guess that's just it. When you have a limit to how much can actually be produced, or at least that's how the Alberta government characterizes that, it does mean that there is a cap on how much investment will go in. And weirdly, it would seem intuitive or counterproductive, because the less Canadian oil there is out there, the less supply that there is on the market globally, the higher prices go up. Now, one could fairly say that those that were in favor of alternate forms of energy and that really are pushing for that would actually like higher oil and gas prices, because it makes the alternate forms of energy, relatively speaking, more economic or less uneconomic. But it does also mean that countries that hate us will end up with more of the profit than Canada will, because Canada really is the only major normal country that is itself a petrocurrency, that has a dollar that's very much linked to the price of energy. After us comes maybe Norway and then Mexico. But in terms of normalcy, the rabbit hole goes very deep when it comes to energy exporting countries after that. So, through Venezuela and Nigeria and these sorts of places that maybe aren't on the same page, or Iran even, that aren't on the same page as the West.
And what impact could Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's push for greater control over Alberta's oil and gas sector have on the economy and the province's relationship with Ottawa?
You mean short of secession? Well, nominally speaking, at least the Constitution says, what I mean nominally, I mean what it says in our Constitution, is that there are a number of areas of the economy that are provincial jurisdictions. Securities, stock exchanges, for example. But one of those areas is natural resources. They are, at least in theory, provincial jurisdictions. So how much energy gets taken out of the ground, the permits for that, how that all works, is supposed to be, when it comes to Alberta's responsibility. But increasingly, there's been a bit of a creep or a jurisdictional overreach when it comes to Ottawa in a number of different areas, not just energy, where by using its immense power to redistribute wealth, the federal government, whose main role in the economy is actually to extract and redistribute taxes, has done this to the benefit of some provinces over others. In principle, it's not a bad idea to have a certain degree of equalization, but when there's overreach such that one province perceives itself, rightly or wrongly, as being punished for having the good fortune to be on one of the largest fossil fuel deposits in the world, I think Alberta could do certain amount, but ultimately it's going to come down to cooperation. Because as much as the production of energy in Alberta should be Alberta's purview, getting that energy to tidewater, getting it to the oceans means either going through BC or Manitoba or the United States or right across the country through Ontario and Quebec. So there's going to need to be a certain amount of cooperation rather than just confrontation.
And what changes might Canada's oil and gas sector see under the new energy minister, Tim Hodgson?
Well, Tim, I first met Tim when at the Olympics in 2010. Neither of us won a medal. I think at the time he was working for Goldman, and I'm still where I was before, working for Caldwell. But he's had a number of adventures since then, including working with Mark Carney while he was governor of the Bank of Canada. Well, when Mark Carney was governor of the Bank of Canada, so it's his first role as a cabinet minister, and I'm cautiously optimistic. He had in his talk, which you showed at the beginning of the segment, much to say about building and getting it done. My caveat would be there's a lot in there about consulting with various groups and making sure everything's looked after, and the devil is in the detail, as they say. So getting all the approvals from all the affected parties has been what's delayed not just energy, but well, in any sort of energy. I mean, we have a huge deposit of so-called rare earths in the Ring of Fire, and none of that's got developed either because of all of the groups that need to be consulted. So it's very well to say we're going to get it done, but you need a process by which it actually gets done, and that perhaps not everybody is perfectly happy with the resolution. They say you have a good deal when everybody's a little bit unhappy.
Now, we do just have under a minute, but how could new government actions and industry changes help Canada attract more investment?
Make it easier for companies to raise money, deploy that money, and become publicly listed. The answer to every problem that faces our nation or any nation isn't more government. The private sector is more nimble and more flexible and deploys capital far more efficiently than any government in any country does, because people are investing their own money. So make it easier for companies to raise money and deploy money, and I think you will find a much better result for the country as a whole. So when it comes to the energy sector, however you define energy, from fossil fuels to rare earths, make it easier for companies to actually get that money spent in the ground and the energy extracted from the vast wealth of natural resources our country has.
Well, en route back to Washington, D.C., President Trump continued his campaign against Harvard University, claiming that Harvard has too many foreign students.
Well, look, part of the problem with Harvard is that there are about 31%, almost 31% of foreigners coming to Harvard. We give them billions of dollars, which is ridiculous. We do grants, which we're probably not going to be doing much grants anymore to Harvard. But they're 31%, but they refuse to tell us who the people are. We want to know who the people. Now, a lot of the foreign students we wouldn't have a problem with. I'm not going to have a problem with foreign students, but it shouldn't be 31%. It's too much, because we have Americans that want to go there and to other places, and they can't go there because you have 31% foreign. Now, no foreign government contributes money to Harvard. We do. So why are they doing so many? Number one. Number two, we want a list of those foreign students, and we'll find out whether or not they're okay. Many will be okay, I assume. And I assume with Harvard, many will be bad. And then the other thing is they're very anti-Semitic. Everybody knows they're anti-Semitic, and that's got to stop immediately.
Our correspondent Wyatt Sharp has more on the issue of foreign students at Harvard.
Donald Trump has now made an effort to try and prevent international students from studying at Harvard University. It really has to do with a long kind of back and forth dispute between the university and the White House. And it's part of kind of a broader effort by the Trump administration to clamp back at some of these institutions, specifically Ivy League institutions, for what they say is really engaging in left-wing propaganda. The Trump administration is unhappy with how they view various Ivy League institutions as kind of harboring pro-Palestinian protesters. They tried to do the same thing at institutions like Columbia. However, places like Columbia really made an effort to kind of cave in to the Trump administration's demands, whereas Harvard refused to do so. And then as a result, this is kind of the consequence. Again, the Trump administration saying that international students will not be allowed. And that's really because the Trump administration thinks that the majority of pro-Palestinian protesters on these campuses are coming from overseas and are coming from foreign countries. But it really kind of sparks a kind of broader debate as to the talent that international students bring, especially to some of these institutions. You have, for example, various statistics that are being cited right now, with 73% of students who come internationally to the United States who say that if it was possible, they would like to have a future in the United States. You have $40 billion worth of revenue that the United States economy gets as a result of these international students. Those are kind of the figures that, again, institutions like Harvard are citing to really kind of underscore the benefit of what these institutions are doing, and what these foreign students are doing to try and kind of make the overall state of the United States economy in a better position and in a better place right now. Harvard took the White House and the administration to court over this, and right now there's a temporary block until the end of May when things perhaps could get a little bit more messy, because then the administration can kind of overrule the temporary block that is in place, and the Trump administration signaling as well that they might want to do this to other institutions as well if it comes down to it.
Residents in Walkerton, Ontario turned on their porch lights and left running shoes outside as a way to show their grief after 4 teenage athletes and their teacher were killed in a multi-vehicle crash outside of London, Ontario last week. The 5 victims had been returning home from the 27th annual Girls High School Invitational Slow Pitch Tournament in Dorchester, Ontario, when their SUV collided with a transport truck at Thorndale and Cobble Hills Road around 4:30 p.m. on Friday. Area residents visited the school throughout the day on Sunday and paid their respects. They added flowers and other mementos to a growing outdoor memorial. Representatives from 3 anti-vaping organizations were on Parliament Hill this morning to call on the new federal health minister, Marjorie Michael, to take action on youth vaping, specifically a ban on vaping flavors.
To begin with, we're calling for the urgent finalization of the regulations first published in 2021, which restrict flavors in vaping products, calling for the regulations to be strengthened so as to prohibit all but tobacco flavors, as is the case in Finland since 2016, Lithuania since 2022, Hungary and Ukraine since 2023, the Netherlands and Slovenia since 2024, and Latvia 2025, and closer to us in the States, California, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and Washington, D.C. Let's be clear. We're not calling for a ban on all vaping products, but only for a ban on the flavored versions that make them interesting and highly appealing to youth. We are reiterating a call made several times these past few years. Indeed, the new government and health minister have inherited a prolonged crisis of youth.
Knicks have once again proven their resilience in the 2025 NBA playoffs. In a thrilling Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals, the Knicks overcame a daunting 20-point deficit to defeat the Indiana Pacers 106-100 on the road. This victory not only narrows the series gap to 2-1, but also marks the Knicks' first playoff win at Gainbridge Fieldhouse in 9 attempts. Karl Anthony Towns delivered a dominant performance, recording 24 points and 15 rebounds. And after the game, Towns spoke to reporters about the Knicks' comeback.
The thing is, like what JB said, just that locker room, it's a true test of we're actually that close in that locker room, if that unity, that continuity is truly there. When you're down, like you said, 20 plus, it tests the character of everyone in that locker room and our willingness to not give up and continue to fight. So, like I've said before, I think this team has shown grittiness all year. Detroit series, Boston series. Tonight was a night we got to show that kind of that never say quit attitude, and it's a testament to everyone in that locker room.
Looking ahead, the Knicks aim to even the series in Game 4, set to take place in Indianapolis tomorrow. A miraculous comeback in the NBA and a blowout in the NHL. Zach Hyman had 2 goals and an assist. Connor McDavid also had 2 goals, and the Edmonton Oilers took a 2-1 lead in their Western Conference Final Series with a 6-1 victory over the Dallas Stars yesterday.
The Oilers are getting to know Bissell a little bit better each and every game. He is a solid guy that been able to throw the body around numerous times.
Duchesne check, up, popped out, and here comes Evander Kane, Hyman to the net, scores!
Edmonton's goaltender Stuart Skinner made 33 saves to secure last night's win. The next game of the series is set for Tuesday in Edmonton, where the Oilers hold a 5-1 record in this playoffs. And Montreal Canadian goal scorer Maurice Richard has been declared a historic figure. The Quebec government announced his designation alongside his family members at a ceremony Sunday at the Bell Centre. The government defines a historic figure as a person who is now deceased who played a role in the province's history. Known as the Rocket, his legendary rise is often cited as a spark for the Quiet Revolution. He took the NHL by storm in the 1940s, becoming the first player to net 50 goals in 50 games, a feat that cemented his status as a cultural icon. I'm Teresa Skubik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. For more news on demand, you can always visit our website at forumdailynews.ca. Good night, Canada.